She controlled the most powerful men in the world, but she started as a girl. No one expected to survive. Ancient Egypt, a land of power, gold, and betrayal. And in the middle of it all, a young princess was born. Her name was Cleopatra. But she wasn't just another royal child. She was different. She was smarter, more ambitious, and far more dangerous than anyone realized. At just 18 years old, she became queen. But there was a problem. She wasn't alone on the throne. In Egypt, rulers didn't rule alone. They ruled with family. And for Cleopatra, that meant something dark. She was forced to marry her own brother, a boy king controlled by powerful advisors. But Cleopatra had no intention of being controlled. She wanted absolute power, and that made her enemies very quickly. The palace turned against her. Plots were made. Whispers filled the halls. And soon, Cleopatra was betrayed. She was forced to flee Egypt, alone. No army, no power, no throne. For most people, this would be the end. But not for Cleopatra, because she wasn't planning to run. She was planning to come back. And when she did, she wouldn't just take back her throne. She would change history forever. She had no army, no power. So she used the only weapon she had left, herself, exiled, alone, and surrounded by enemies. Cleopatra knew one thing. If she wanted power back, she needed help. And not just any help. She needed the most powerful man in the world. At that time, that man was Julius Caesar, a conqueror, a legend, a man who decided the fate of nations. But there was one problem. Caesar was in Egypt, and Cleopatra was banned from even entering the palace. If she was caught, she would be executed instantly. But Cleopatra didn't care, because she had a plan, a crazy, dangerous plan. One night, she secretly entered the palace, hidden inside a carpet. Yes, a carpet, smuggled past guards into Caesar's private room. And when the carpet was unrolled, there she was, face to face, with the most powerful man in the world. Cleopatra didn't beg, she didn't cry. She spoke with confidence, with intelligence, with charm. And Caesar was fascinated, not just by her beauty, but by her mind, her ambition, her fire. That night, everything changed because Cleopatra didn't just win Caesar's attention, she won his support. And with that, she was about to take back her throne. But what came next was far more dangerous than anyone expected. She came back with power, but now she wanted control over an empire. With the support of Julius Caesar, Cleopatra was no longer alone. She returned to Egypt, not as a fugitive, but as a queen backed by Rome. War broke out inside Egypt, brother against sister, throne against throne. The palace that once betrayed her now feared her, because Cleopatra wasn't the same girl anymore. She had changed, she had learned, and now she had power. Her brother's forces were defeated. The young king drowned while trying to escape. And just like that, Cleopatra became the undisputed ruler of Egypt. But she didn't stop there, because Cleopatra wasn't thinking small. She wasn't just ruling Egypt, she was playing a much bigger game. She formed a powerful alliance with Caesar, and soon, that alliance became something more, a relationship, a bond of power and desire. Cleopatra even traveled to Rome, where people whispered her name. Some admired her, others feared her, because she wasn't just a queen anymore. She was influencing the most powerful man in the world, and that made her dangerous. But power like this always comes with a price, because in Rome, enemies were watching, waiting, planning, and soon, everything would change. One moment, she had everything. The next, it was all gone. Rome, the heart of power, but also the home of betrayal. Julius Caesar had become too powerful, too influential, too dangerous for his enemies, and among them were men who once called him friend. They believed Caesar wanted to become king, a ruler of Rome, and that was something they would never allow. So they made a plan, a brutal plan. On a cold day in March, inside the Senate, Caesar was surrounded, not by enemies, but by people he trusted. And then, the knives came out, one after another. He was stabbed again and again and again, until the most powerful man in the world fell to the ground, dead. Rome was in chaos, power was gone, and Cleopatra lost everything in a single moment. Her protector, her ally, her connection to power, gone. She had no choice. She fled Rome immediately, back to Egypt, back to uncertainty, because now the world had changed, and without Caesar, Cleopatra was once again alone. But not for long, because soon another powerful man would enter her life, a man who would bring her love, war, and ultimate destruction. Mark Antony. She lost one powerful man, but the next one would destroy everything. After the death of Julius Caesar, Rome was no longer stable. Power was divided, and one man began to rise. Mark Antony, a warrior, a leader, a man known for passion and power. He summoned Cleopatra, not as a lover, but to question her loyalty. Because Rome suspected her of playing both sides. But Cleopatra had done this before. She knew exactly what to do. She didn't arrive like a prisoner. She arrived like a goddess, sailing on a golden ship, dressed in royal beauty, surrounded by luxury, perfume, and music. It wasn't just an entrance, it was a performance, and it worked. Mark Antony was captivated, not just by her beauty, but by her presence, her confidence, her power. What started as a political meeting turned into something else, something deeper, something dangerous. They became allies, then lovers, and together, they became one of the most powerful forces in the world. But this wasn't just love, this was strategy. Because Cleopatra knew, if she controlled Antony, she could control Rome's future. But love, mixed with power, never ends well, because far away in Rome, another man was watching. A man who saw this relationship as a threat, and that man was about to start a war. What began as love was about to become war. Rome was divided. On one side, Mark Antony and Cleopatra. On the other, Augustus, Octavian, a cold, calculated leader, and he saw Cleopatra not as a queen, but as a threat to Rome itself. He believed that she was manipulating Antony, turning him against his own people. So he did something smart. He didn't just declare war on Antony, he declared war on Cleopatra. And suddenly, this wasn't just politics anymore. This was survival. The tension exploded into one of the most famous battles in history, the Battle of Actium. Ships clashed, fire burned across the sea, chaos everywhere, and in the middle of it all, Cleopatra made a decision that changed everything. She retreated. She pulled her fleet away from the battle, and Antony, seeing her leave, followed her, leaving his army behind. That single moment destroyed everything. Rome saw it as betrayal, as weakness, as failure, and just like that, their power began to collapse. They returned to Egypt, but this time, not as rulers of the world, but as fugitives, because Rome was coming, and this time, there would be no escape. They once ruled the world. Now, they were running out of time. After their defeat, Mark Antony and Cleopatra returned to Egypt. But everything had changed. The power they once held was gone. Their armies were weaker. Their allies had abandoned them. And Rome was getting closer every day, led by Augustus, a man who didn't just want victory, he wanted complete control. Egypt was surrounded. There was no escape. Inside the palace, fear had replaced confidence. Mark Antony, the once fearless warrior, started to break. Defeat had destroyed him. He drank more, thought less, and trusted no one. Then came the moment. That ended everything. Antony heard a rumor, a lie, that Cleopatra was dead. And in that moment of grief, he made a fatal decision. He chose death. He fell on his own sword. But the truth was even more tragic. Cleopatra was alive. When Antony realized this, it was already too late. Bleeding, dying, he was carried to her and in her arms, the great warrior took his final breath. The man who once commanded armies died broken, and Cleopatra was left alone again. But this time, there was no plan left, no escape, no power, only one final decision. She had lost everything, but she refused to lose control. Augustus entered Egypt. Victory was his, the empire was his, and Cleopatra was now his prisoner. But Augustus had plans. He didn't want to kill her. He wanted to display her, in chains, in Rome, as a symbol of victory. For Cleopatra, that was worse than death. She had been a queen, a ruler, a woman who controlled kings. She would never allow herself to be paraded as a trophy. So she made a decision, her final move, her final act of control. No one knows exactly how it happened, but history tells us she chose death. Some say a venomous snake, an asp. Others say poison. But one thing is certain. Cleopatra died on her own terms, not as a prisoner, but as a queen. With her death, an era ended. Egypt fell to Rome, and one of the most powerful women in history became a legend. But even today, one question remains. Was Cleopatra truly a master of power, or just a woman, trapped in a world ruled by men?